Welcome to FinTech Confidential, bringing you the people, tech, and companies that change how you pay and get paid. On this episode, we're excited to sit down with Rodney Williams, the president and co-founder of Solo Funds. Rodney's not only the president and co-founder of Solo Funds, he's a seasoned entrepreneur with a rich background in brand management and technology.
I think it's ultimately hurt FinTech. What I see is more people leaving FinTech than ever before. That's what I see. I see founders who their company has failed. I've seen former employees that have left FinTech and now work at Netflix. If you haven't figured out that FinTech is starving and is on a downward decline right now, it may be a lot to talk about, but there's a lot less people to talk about it. And that's sad. How do you lead in this environment? I lead the way we started. Because of the customers, we know without a doubt, we're doing the right thing. Despite the headlines, despite the press, we tell each one of our employees, if you don't think we're doing something right, then you should leave. They don't leave. If you think about my first company where we started with the tech, and we built a company around the tech. Solo is a company where we started with the purpose, and we built the company around the purpose. We define it as financial autonomy, and we identified two core reasons my friends and family, working class people, were not financially autonomous. Due to limited cash flow, when they needed cash, there wasn't a consistent resource. It wasn't a resource that they can depend on. Because in the United States, our consistency is dependent on the credit score. Consistent should just be consistent. I had reached a point of success, definitely a lot more success than anyone in my family. I kept going back home to my friends and family still needing $50 to go out or $100 to keep the lights on. I was bothered by my friends and family who were working class. They went to school, they graduated. They had very, very limited savings. They would find themselves in a bind that there wasn't a product fully designed for their bind. There wasn't a product that they could really depend on.
Hey, Ted Huff here. Ever thought about how you could streamline your application and underwriting process? Well, let me introduce you to Under. Why keep using the outdated methods of PDFs when you can digitize them effortlessly? All you gotta do is upload the PDF, send it out for digital signature, and voila, you're set for the digital age. Are you curious on how to make that happen? Head over to under.io/FTC and get started for free. It's really that simple. Welcome to the FinTech Confidential series, Leaders One-on-One, where we sit down with FinTech leaders to learn about what drives the passion for FinTech. We're excited to sit down with Rodney Williams, the president and co-founder of Solo Funds. He's a seasoned entrepreneur with a rich background in brand management and technology. His journey began at Procter Gamble, and then he later co-founded Listnr. Rodney's passion for financial equity led him to co-founding Solo to offer a fair alternative to payday lending for the underserved communities. His commitment to this community is further demonstrated through partnerships with organizations like Habitat for Humanity and United Way, ensuring that the benefits of their success are reinvested into the communities that they serve. Let's dive deeper into his inspiring journey and learn more about how Solo Funds is changing lives. Rodney, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
There are a few people that I know that intentionally got into financial technology, but most of us just kind of fall into it. Can you share your personal journey?
I didn't know I was on a FinTech journey. I started my career at Procter Gamble. I turned into a brand manager. I did a lot of things digital, led a lot of the first social media strategies and strategy around, how do we connect to consumers in more places than in the standard media advertising world. So that brought me to Silicon Valley. Shopping and became a big topic in our meetings. How did this consumer shop? How will they shop in the future? What will the checkout experience actually look like? And that's what evolved me into thinking about technology and indirectly becoming into FinTech, because right around me being stuck at the checkout, I always thought about, the cell phone and ways in which this device would communicate to a point of sale. I thought about QR codes and Bluetooth. I started to think about sound that humans can't hear, but devices could hear. I wrote an initial patent on this concept of using ultrasonic audio, which is essentially just audio outside of the human hearing range, but has frequency modulation that can actually transport data. I mean, I went on a startup competition called the Startup Bus on the way to Austin, Texas.
I'm familiar with the Startup Bus.
Yes. I get on the bus and I tell people my incredible idea, and I didn't think a lot of people would gravitate towards it. Well, 4 individuals did. They ended up being my co-founders. We took this company. We launched it out of Cincinnati, Ohio. We were the first company to win the Visa Fast Track initiative, and we had investors from Intel Capital, and we signed huge deals with like Ticketmaster and Target, and that company became Listnr, and it became a FinTech. It didn't start out as a FinTech, nor did I even know the word of FinTech.
So it's so funny you mentioned Listnr, and I was reading the documentation, doing the research, and I was like, this sounds so familiar to me. So I started looking at the background, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember, because I worked a lot with Visa during the day, and I remember with a couple of people on the fast track approval committee asking me, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about this? Do you think it has some legs? And at that time, I remember looking at it and going, that is actually really freaking cool, because around that time, you had Touch to Pay that was out, that was using fingerprint biometrics. You had the beginnings of a lot of the touchless, as I will call it, payment methods. And there was an article that was written, and I tried to find it, I couldn't find it. But they compared the technology to the way dolphins communicate. And I remember that for Listnr and all those pieces. So that is really cool to hear the story of how it all started, because that's something I actually was involved in unbeknownst to me during that process.
That's the right story. I mean, honestly, incredible journey. I traveled the world advocating for ultrasonics use and mobile checkout. And we had some wins and some losses. And, we went up against Apple at some point in time, and near field communication. The company is still active to this day. And Visa is still a huge component. That company has done some incredible work with Visa. The number one reason the average consumer hasn't experienced it yet, it's 100% driven by the bureaucracy of the device. Who knew that this device had more bureaucracy than Washington, D.C.?
I've been on the journey of FinTech for over 2.5 decades. I've been lucky enough to be part of the attempt to use biometrics originally, the attempt to use Bluetooth Low Energy to do payments, the out-of-band experience, like all these different things. I even was lucky enough to participate in the launch of Apple Pay and Google Pay and what was formerly known as Samsung Pay. Like all of these things, I've gotten to participate in all of these mobile payment technologies, and the carriers wanted to manage it. And then the carriers then got overtaken by the hardware manufacturers, and it's been this like real weird dichotomy that goes on. Like you mentioned, there's some bureaucracy that goes along with it, but that I believe is the reason why in the US there hasn't been a super app happening, because there's so much stranglehold on the device itself. What was that pivotal moment in your journey that inspired you to create Solo Funds?
I think Listnr was like a 5-time CNBC disruptor company. I had reached a point of success, definitely a lot more success than anyone in my family. I kept going back home to my friends and family still needing $50 to go out or $100 to keep the lights on. Just as I was bothered at the checkout experience with Listnr, I was bothered by my friends and family who were working class. They went to school, they graduated, but they had very, very limited savings. They would find themselves in a bind. There wasn't a product fully designed for their bind. There wasn't a product that they could really depend on, or that I felt comfortable giving them one. So it really sparked me to think about doing something differently. And I remember coming out of Listnr, I always said, hey, if I did another company, I wanted to have an impact. There needed to be a lot more innovation in this area. And when I looked around, there wasn't a bunch of innovation in this area. or the innovation was being restricted. And, in my crazy mind, I'm like, well, let's go do that. No one else is doing. That's what started this. Honestly, it still bothers us. Our friends and family are still using us or products like us. Our research and development, our customer support, I still have an intimate conversation with family members about what's going on. That unique perspective has allowed us to create something pretty special.
Everything from P&G all the way to Solo today, it's safe to say that it didn't go without some challenges, right? What are some of the key lessons that you learned during Listnr and before that you've brought in to Solo to help accelerate the movement?
Listnr was heavy tech, deep tech, great tech, and it worked. One of the things that I learned from a product standpoint, as just infrastructure, you can never fully realize the vision that you're intending to produce. You have to kind of create the entire ecosystem. It switched my mindset from wanting to do infrastructure, FinTech, to wanting to create the entire ecosystem. From a leader perspective, I was a younger leader, an early entrepreneur 14 years ago. I was definitely more Bezos-like. And I'm a big Bezos fan. You can call me what you want to call me. I'm okay with it.
I got to ask you, how do you define that, by the way? When you say more Bezos-like, what does that mean?
Well, I'm one of my favorite entrepreneur books is The Everything Store. It talks about his struggle, even raising his first $1 million. I think it took like over 100 investors to do so. His vision of the Everything Store, despite the fact that no one thought that would work, he had to start by selling first books and CDs and then media. And then he's kind of, he took him 20 plus years to kind of create the vision that he saw so long ago. And he was so steadfast in his vision that anyone who interfered with that had to go. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. It was like the Bezos show. Bezos hired a bunch of P&Gers. There's something about being steadfast on your mission that's very similar to how P&Gers think. I'm a huge component of that. And you got to understand how ambitious that was, especially for someone like a P&Ger. At that point in time, his whole concept is that if I could put everything online, and if I could ultimately get it to you more efficiently, I would be able to offer it cheaper than Walmart. Meaning that I was going to, if Walmart was everyday low prices, at some point in time, I was going to have lower prices. Therefore, I was going to be able to help more consumers. I think he ultimately delivered on that and has been steadfast on that. And I think in my Listnr, I was super steadfast at my vision. And sometimes that was a train that if you got in the way, I would pray for you. As I moved over to Solo, I think I'm a little bit different. I think I care about who's on the train. I still care about where we're going, but I'm also patient enough to know that we're going to get there.
So I'm going to just divert here a little bit. In your mind, going from that full steam ahead train on the tracks, if you're on the tracks, I'm just going to knock you off the tracks. Either you're on the train or you're not. Moving over into, hey, I care who's on the train with me. I care about the speed we're going. I care about the direction. I care about the ethereal parts of everything now more so. Was there a point in the journey that you were just like, oh crap, I need to look at this different. I struggle to use this word, but more empathetic in the way that I drive the vision and mission forward. Support provided by Skyflow. What if you could build fast but not break privacy? What if you could ensure data privacy, governance, and compliance with just a few API calls? What if you could worry less about PCI requirements while actually improving privacy and security? How much more time would your team have to truly innovate? How much faster could you build and ship new features? How much more powerful could your app be? Skyflow is a zero-trust data privacy vault delivered as an API. Skyflow's radically simple design lets you collect, secure, and tokenize personal information like card data and payment details. And with built-in features like encrypted data analysis and sharing, anonymization, and advanced governance, your days of choosing between data security and data usability are over. Whether you're just concerned with PCI compliance or need to go further to include CCPA, GDPR, SOC 2, and beyond, Skyflow has you covered. What if you could build fast but not break privacy? With Skyflow, you can. Visit skyflowsecure.com today to learn how.
There's so many moments when that
There's got to be one that stands out, though.
I mean, the number one thing that's handed out is dealing with regulators. And I'm a simple guy to the extent that there's right and wrong. To me, there's no gray. Right has nothing to do with a piece of paper or a document. Right feels right, tastes right, looks right. It's just right. If I have two bananas and one's cheaper than the other, that's just cheaper. It tastes cheaper. It looks cheaper. It's cheaper. When it comes to my product, I always thought a better product is just better. And that the industry, regulators, so everyone, they would be able to see it better. They would be able to taste it better. And that's what innovation should be. That's what I always thought. And better for us was a product that was more affordable for consumers and a product where the proceeds of the activity is going back to the consumer. I always thought that regulators would have discernment and logic and be able to see that and understand that was better and figure out a solution for us. I've learned the opposite. It doesn't matter about that. It matters about a lot of things that are bigger than me, a lot of things that are outside my control. And that's the part of the empathy that I had to learn. I can't have those expectations for regulators. We were going to have to advocate for it. We're going to have to bring the research to them, be the voice of our consumer. We're going to have to do all of the things and be empathetic to maybe that there is no innovation model. Be empathetic that there's no licensing or there's no regulatory body to look at innovation. There's no department within regulation that cares about innovation. I would have to be empathetic to the restrictions and the capabilities of our administration and do our best to work with them. That's the hardest thing for this train. I just want to do the right thing and write it right. Cheaper is right. Consumers, community finance is right. People helping each other, it's just right. And there's no ifs, ands, or but about it. That's my daily challenge. But I'm a much more of an empathetic person than I used to be, for sure.
You know, you've talked about it's just right. All the things you do around it just should be supporting that. You know, we haven't talked a whole lot about solo funds specifically, but a lot of the things you've talked about, I think, lead us right into the mission and the vision of the company. I'd love for you to, in your own words, share like what is that core mission of Solo?
On my first company, where we started with the tech and we built a company around the tech. Solo is a company where we started with the purpose. We define it as financial autonomy, and we identified two core reasons my friends and family, working class people, were not financially autonomous. Due to limited cash flow, when they needed cash, there wasn't a consistent resource. It wasn't a resource that they can depend on. Because in the United States, our consistency is dependent on a credit score. Consistent should just be consistent. People who need capital should have access to it. When my aunt, she's a cleaning lady for the mayor in her town, she finally had a job and she had savings. It's not growing. So she's going to work there for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you name it. But at the end of every year, it's not growing, meaning it's not getting any yield. She's adding to it, but it's not getting any yield because it's sitting at Chase or Wells Fargo or some other account where she's not getting the investment opportunities I'm getting. My money is growing 20 to 30, 40% every year. I got all these fancy people telling me what to do. If you wanted to create a financially autonomous society, you would need to create both things for the average American to be able to have access to. That was our purpose. And then we built a product for it. And if you think about it on the borrower side, we radically thought about things. One of the things that everyone thinks is that like, oh, we designed our product to bypass laws. No, that's not what happened. We wrote our product to address these two problems. And then we went to the lawyers and they told us what they told us. We wanted borrowers to create their own choice because, again, very different than what the industry would tell you. These are the most budget savvy, financially literate people you would ever imagine because they know exactly when their Netflix bill is going to hit their account. They survive off of $20 an entire week. This group can be very, very aware about what they can pay and how they can pay it and when they can pay it. So giving them the choice of selecting that was key. And the other part of that is that it cannot grow over time. They cannot calculate how that compounds and hurts them over time. They just know it does. If they select they need $100 and they're going to pay back $110, they need to know that it's going to be $110 today. And 3 years from now, it's going to be $110. That's how we designed the borrower side. The lending member side, it's needed to be liquid because most of these lenders are not lending from like this huge savings pool. They're lending from their like operating capital, meaning they get paid this 2 weeks, they're going to lend a little bit, and then they need that back. We wanted to create a very, very liquid potential return option that could be as low as $20. And that's the match for the $20 loan. But the short-term duration, even though they may only, be making 1 percentage point, due to the short duration over time, it could turn into 15, 20% APY. And just to give you something that we are very, very proud of, and that's the only thing that matters to us. Borrowers on average pay 17% for solo. That's 17%, whether they pay on the 15th day or 5 years from today. That's what they pay. All late fees, all everything that you could possibly do. There's nothing more affordable than that. Now, if you want to be funny math and you want to try to calculate it at 2 weeks, okay. If you want to calculate it at 5 years, you should give us that credit as well. Because we have users that also pay it then as well. On the lender side, our average lender since the start of our company has a return of over 20% APY. That's better than S&P 500 average. Why is that important? To my cousin who has $2,000 for savings and who lends now, who used to be a borrower, she's going to make $400 at the end of the year. And she's going to have money for Christmas instead of dipping into her savings. So when she does have an emergency next year, she's not going to have to use it. We're the only lending platform, literally, in the United States that has a pathway for you to earn money so you don't have to borrow.
What are the 3 key strategies that you've implemented at Solo that drives the mission forward?
One of them is transparency. Transparency is important. The fact that the borrowers select their own choices. The borrowers can not only see what they're paying for a loan, they can see what everybody else is paying for a loan in the platform.
When you say select choices, what do you mean by that?
When a borrower comes on our platform, they select how much they need, when they're going to pay it back, and how much they're going to pay for the loan. When they select how much they're going to pay, they select what they're going to give their lending member as a tip of appreciation, and then what they're going to donate to the platform. It's all selected by the borrower, never the lender. If you ever borrowed money, I would tell you one of the saddest experiences is filling out all that paperwork for them to tell you no, or for them to tell you and then tell you the terms that you are going to get. So you may have only needed $500 and you need to pay it back in 2 weeks, but they're going to tell you, I'm going to give you $200. We wanted to radically shift that because number one, we felt that this group of borrowers, if given the choice, they would know what they could actually pay more than we.
It's really interesting because I'm drawing parallels with some other regions of the world that they handle things in a strikingly similar model. The one that feels closest would be Brazil, where they use parcelas, where just about everything, you could buy a pack of gum on an installment program, and you say, hey, I'm going to pay this over 4 payments because I know what my spend is. Kind of like what you were talking about with, I know when my Netflix is hitting, I know how much it's hitting, I know that specific down to the payment structure. One thing that I love about what you're doing here is that you're not just giving the opportunity to select the structure of the borrowing experience, but you're also bringing them into the lending side of it, it feels like, to benefit from participating. I'm seeing the similarities between the structures.
And interesting enough, when we were in the planning stages and picking to address those problems, and to be very clear, we planned this company for 3 years before anyone went full time on it.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
We also traveled to Africa, we traveled to South America, we traveled to Southeast Asia. We looked at everything from Yunus, can't pronounce his name correct, but the father of community finance. We looked at all these different informal savings club models. And in those days, we looked at every peer-to-peer product in the world that we could find and dissected them went wrong. But I remember the beginning, and everyone told us this would never work.
That's how you know you have a good idea.
They're like, you're going to tell them, you're going to let them pick their own cost, and then some stranger is going to give them money. How are you going to create trust? how are they going to get their money back? And no one's going to do this. And every peer-to-peer model did it and it failed eventually. And you guys are just not, this is not going to happen. I thought that was interesting because they don't say that anymore.
As default rates continue to rise and margins compress in lending, financial organizations are searching for solutions to combine that operational efficiency with innovation. Look no further, as LoanPro allows lenders to enhance their origination, servicing, collections, and payments using the foundation of a modern lending core. Check out loanpro.io to learn more about how over 600 financial organizations have modernized their tech stack with LoanPro.
And it goes back to something you said, though. The transparency. That's transparent. That's empowering for them to do that. It's a totally different experience. We actually have surveyed, they actually feel almost like a visceral reaction when they submit a request versus when they apply for a loan. The process of it is significantly more attractive to them. We've already won the customer before they even got funded.
They have that feeling like, I'm in control. I'm the one setting the terms. And I can only imagine that the collection rate on these loans is dramatically higher than the average because of that sense of ownership, loyalty, and accountability to what they said that they were going to do versus someone telling them how they had to do it. Am I accurate on that?
You are 100% accurate. Since day one, our default rate has been better than our competitors. Today, it's 5 times better. So before we even got smart about it, it was better. But it was better because of the psychological nature of them controlling the experience. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more transparent about knowing exactly what you selected to pay. You can read the allegations and headlines about hidden fees and hiding things, but they don't never want to tell you that it's borrower selected. That's the part of this entire problem that bothers me.
Can you dive into that like a little bit deeper? Like, you know, we have these overdraft and we have these other fees that CFPB has been really pushing on. Overdraft, they've been pushing on junk fees. And the reason why I use air quotes is because that falls under whatever they deem to be junk for whomever they're working with. Like all of those different things. And then you talk about the borrower selected pieces behind. Go a little bit deeper in there.
I mean, whether it's the CFPB or other state regulators, they have said that we have hidden fees as well, or we have selected fees or chunk fees as well, mainly because we call them tip and donation. I know there's other companies that also call them tips and donations, but our stance is you can't compare a fee that's selected by the borrower and say there's anything hidden about it. You're trying to compare a fee that's selected by a borrower to a fee that's told to a user by a lender. It's not even told. It's in the contract. There's actually a fee schedule when you get a loan.
On page like 300 of 500 pages.
Yeah, different topic. I go to buy a house. I say, oh, great, I have a great interest rate and it's home. And then as you look into the details, you look at one mortgage at 6%, another one at 6%, but the cost is outrageously different because the origination cost is different, closing costs, and you name it. That's how our financial system communicates cost. What's radical about us is not the tips and donation. What's radical is that we've given them choice. We've given them control. Optionality, transparency, and empowerment are the 3 core things that make our product special. That transparency can never be hidden. There's nothing about that that's deceptive. It can't be. It's the only way that could be deceptive is they're deceiving themselves. So you got to understand, when I used to read these headlines, they get so frustrated because they're like, well, I selected it. I know I selected it.
I can only imagine there's a whole bunch of other things that we're starting to see in FinTech in general around just funds, where they're at, who's accounted for them, whether or not it's being held in the right kind of account. I mean, there's so many things that go on when you start talking about money storage, money tracking, and money movement. That the regulators really latch on to. How have you been leading through all of this uncertainty?
So that's been challenging. It kind of goes to, I think it's ultimately hurt FinTech. What I see is more people leaving FinTech than ever before. I see founders who their company has failed. I've seen former employees that have left FinTech and now work at Netflix. There's FinTech media partners. I forgot the media platform that lend it. All right, I forgot, but it's like
Yeah, so Bo Brustern, I know him very, very well. He used to be called Lendit, got converted over to FinTech Nexus. He sold his event to FinTech Meetup earlier this year in 2024. He had to shutter the doors on the media side of the house.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real reality. There's certain bloggers and Substack guys that we all know. I don't know when FinTech became sensational. So it's sensational on the media side. It's sensational on the regulators. I'm a marketer. So when I read some of these press releases, I only giggle. A lot of it would be wrong for a brand to do. Turned into enforcement by press releases, turned into enforcement by blog, enforcement by tweet. What that is ultimately doing is creating a problem. There's less funding for FinTech today than there were. There's less companies. There's VCs that are cutting back. They're investing in Africa, in South America.
Anywhere but the U.S.
Anywhere but the U.S. So if you haven't figured out that FinTech is starving and is on a downward decline right now, it may be a lot to talk about because of all of the scrutiny. It's a lot of things to talk about. There's a lot less people to talk about it with. And that's that.
It has been a really tough 3 years for the FinTech community. I believe a lot of it started with regulatory rules enforced through punishment. And there's probably a better way to word it, but like you didn't find out. And actually, I even had a friend of mine call me just the other day, and they're like, what is up with like me seeing consent orders for banks like every other day? And I'm like, well, actually, they only come out every Friday. So so it's not every other day, but the news is pushing that. But at the same time, in general, it's not well understood what gets to a consent order, what a consent order actually means. There are varying levels of how bad things happen around that. And his question to me was, so is this kind of like a public shaming to get you to do something that they want you to do that maybe doesn't make sense? I hate to say it, but it really feels that way. It really feels like it's a way to publicly shame the entity which it's happening to, for them to change the way that they serve their customers. And I struggle with that. And I think, like you mentioned, that has had a lot of people really step back. What that's also done is the cost to get started. And I talked to FinWise Bank a while back on a different series, but we were looking at it and we're like, hey, so what it used to cost to start a FinTech was two guys in a garage and maybe $100,000. Now, in order to hit all these regulatory hurdles, you've got to be coming to the table with enough powder to last you 3-5 years and pay for all the regulatory requirements and certifications. So you might be able to get it started with the idea for $100,000, but you're very quickly going to be in the $20 million range within the first 3 years. And so that's what I'm seeing happening. And I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah. I mean,
now that I just got off my soapbox.
No, it's listen, that's the real conversation.
So we may have to take that one over to the series called Uncut, where we just talk about the stuff that's going on. But that's kind of where I was headed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the real conversation. The cost to start a FinTech, the cost to maintain a FinTech, and then the unknown cost, because you don't know.
Hidden in junk fees? What?
Well,
Sorry.
Because of your point, legislation by enforcement, it's a major problem, because in the absence of a law, regulators can interpret something in a certain way. Because they can't find like the clear illegal activity, the public shaming in the press release is the win. It just further hurts the venture capital community. The first time we got our first cease and desist, we had a term sheet for our $30 million Series B that was told to us that Friday at evening, and that cease and desist came on Sunday, and we did not get that term sheet. I fast forward to this year, we had a tier 1 major financial service company. So not even a true VC. This is someone who believes in us, reviewed the model, understands the legal uncertainty, understand where we were, understand where regulators are, and still was going to decide to give us a term sheet. But with the latest actions coming from the CFPB, they said not right now. They didn't say no, but they said not right now. And you're talking about we're a company who we raised our last price round in January of 2021. We have been unable to raise capital from new investors. Only existing investors have saved us from payroll when we needed it. We have been left on our own to survive. If it wasn't for our users deciding to use us and growing despite everything that's happening, we would have died 10 times. I know as of last week, we started off the week not knowing how we were going to pay bills. And by Friday, we were able to pay bills because that week we grew like 15 to 20%.
I mean, I've been there too, man. I remember being an executive at a startup week of Christmas Eve one year. We're looking at the bank balance and we're like, the last payday before Christmas Eve, we don't know how we're going to pay it. And then having to find the funds for that. So like, as you're talking about, I'm having this visceral reaction, this like pit in my stomach, because I understand that level of what are we going to do? How do we get there? And I'm super, super happy to hear that the growth that you're having and the way you're delivering to the market is resonating so well that growth supports your growth and supports your ongoing business for now, until there is not just a light at the tunnel from the investors, but that clear line of sight to the end for them. And I got to say, I applaud you for sticking to it and having your stick-to-itness of this, because that's a hard place to be, man. It's a really, really hard place to be.
It's really, really hard. And I think it goes back to your question of like, how do you lead in this environment? Because of the customers, we know without a doubt, we're doing the right thing. Despite the headlines, despite the press, we tell each one of our employees, you can talk to them. You should get on the phone. If you don't think we're doing something right, then you should leave. I'm okay with that. They don't leave. Our investors, sometimes they come to us and they're like, what's going on? I don't want to be on the wrong side of this. And I tell them the same thing. Talk to our members. Do the research. If you think we're doing something wrong, please let us know. B Corp called us. They said, we got to look at it again. Look at it again. If we did something wrong, tell us.
I failed to mention the fact that you're a certified B Corp. I've only had 3 certified B Corps on FinTech Confidential. One was a community bank, Muskoma Bank. The other one, Summer, and now you. So there's my third one, man. One of the things that I love about the B Corp perspective, it is all about how you serve your customers and how you continue to do the right thing, even when it's hard.
Now, we became a certified B Corp before there was any press or headline about it. We already held ourselves to a greater standard than anyone asked us to.
What was that decision like to be a certified B Corp? What was the decision-making process or the piece that popped into y'all's mind when that happened?
You know, I told you about that 3-year journey that we like traveled the world and, met all these great founders. Well, so you got to understand, like during that time period, I was still running my previous company. So I also had access to these incredible other founders, and we got an opportunity to meet some of the early B Corps and the B Corp founders. Early B Corps were like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's ice cream and Sundial and Tom's shoes. And we got a chance to sit down with those guys and the founders of B Corp. If you know about them, they used to be the founders of a streetwear brand called N1. And that's a great story. But they all believe that doing good can be a business model. And they were all very successful at doing good and it being a business model. We spent hours talking to these founders about treating people right, treating their employees right, slimming your margins down. Your margins don't have to be what everybody else is going to be. It's the same concept. When you look at our business model, every VC asks the same question. Your underwriting is so good. Your ledger system is so good. Your recovery process is so good. Why don't you just lend your own money? I will give you a debt instrument today, and you should be your own lender, because that's not the business that I'm in. I'm not in the lending business. I'm in a community social impact finance business. I'm in the business of helping people and doing good. There's nothing about our data and infrastructure that said that we should do it. Just like Ben & Jerry ice cream or Patagonia, there was nothing about Patagonia on why it should have been a cooperative. We're like, that didn't make any sense outside of the fact that outdoor enthusiasts are a community that liked to be a community and it was better off as a community. That's why we have to be so empathetic to the headline. Whoever you think you're talking about, you just must have not met us yet. You can't, or you haven't met anyone that known us, or you didn't do your research. It took us 8 months to become a certified B Corp. And everyone understands the process. They're looking at your financials. They're visiting the office. They're looking at who you pay everyone. They're looking at your vendors you choose. They're looking at your profit margin, your contracts, how much you're selling it for. They're making sure you're making the right choices. It's actually very difficult to be a B Corp as a financial service. That's why most don't do it.
There's not very many. I was pulling the list back when I was talking to Muskoma Bank the first time, and I realized that there's like, in the US, there's maybe 3 banks that have done certified B Corp. And then I started looking for other financial technology companies. And I think I got to like a total of like 20. I'm going back in my memory, so I'm probably off a little bit. But 20 financial technology companies globally, not in the US, globally. That's a really big thing that to be able to do and to deliver on and to maintain, because it's not easy, like you mentioned. I do want you to share with us your thoughts on where the market is headed based upon the feedback you're getting from your team and from your users. How do you see Solo helping differently in the future?
Here's my favorite thing. I have never said this directly, but I'm going to tell it to you. Before I worked at P&G, I worked for the U.S. government, and I worked at Department of Energy, National Energy Technology Laboratory, and then I worked at Lockheed Martin. I quit Lockheed Martin to go get my MBA, and then I ultimately ended up at Procter Gamble. I quit Lockheed Martin as I was getting recruited to be a security officer. It turns me on when I see a hard problem. It makes me want to not go to sleep until I fix it. To be transparent, I was doing it for a government contractor. What most people don't know is that America sells many of its weapons to other parts of the world. We just sell like bad versions of it. So if like we have a missile,
the rejects.
There's a missile guidance system that has a 300-mile radius. We sell it and it has a 150-mile radius. That's how we make it. So I was really good at like communicating.
So you're making me think of like the outlet mall. where it's like the seconds and like the stuff that really won't sell in the store, but it's cheap enough to make, so why not?
What I'm trying to say is like I've been making my way from like things that hurt people, getting paid to like manipulate things, to brand, to checkout, to like, all right, now I'm like, I'm with the people. I'm helping people now. Now I have to outthink. So what's the pathway for it? Number one, all FinTech companies, you have to create a very, very collaborative approach with regulators. It's not us against them. We understand the limited resources, the limited ability to truly understand what we do. As a FinTech, it's our job to build, to be as collaborative as possible. And also gain advocacy in certain aspects, believe that if you're doing the right thing, it will prevail. Every state has given us a pathway for it. I like to think that's because they believe we are doing the right thing. What we decided 3 years ago when we saw this thing, we were going to have to reinvent based on everything we know. It was going to have to be better. And I'm going to be very clear about this new invention. We're so excited about it. We received a positive opinion letter from the state of California around it. We're doing this very, very differently. We architected an entirely new framework, a new financial product. We've received positive opinion letters. We've received licensing for it. And when it launches, it's going to be so buttoned up. It's going to be like a brand new car. We have spent millions of dollars delivering that product. Most people don't have the opportunity to do so. And a new FinTech would never have an opportunity to do so because that's a huge bet on a product that you don't even understand is going to technically work.
In one sentence, what is the one piece of advice that you would give FinTech entrepreneurs about choosing the right path, the right product, the right focus?
I would tell them to make sure it's tied into their true purpose and tied into what they truly want to do in life. In this current climate, the adversity is unwarranted and you're going to have to overcome it. And what I mean by that is whether it's on the regulatory side, the capitalization side, or things that are completely out of your control. We were built on Synapse and Evolve. and something that's completely out of your control, potentially wiping you out. I joke that sometimes it's like being a FinTech founder today is like being in the middle of a war and you're getting shot at by both sides.
Yep.
Your own team, you're the opposing team, you're just getting shot. Maybe, and that's the challenge. So if you're going to do it, you got to believe in it. It has to be connected to your purpose. You have to want to do this truly. And I don't care if it's AI, I don't care if it's crypto, I don't care if it's infrastructure play. Everyone is getting scrutiny. The only group that's not getting scrutiny is the one that has the most money because they can pay for not getting scrutiny. And good luck being that one. They're on it.
Oh, Rodney, man, like I mentioned, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. There's so many places that we could go, and I'm definitely going to have to bring you back on to one of the uncut episodes. And you've given me some really, really good ideas on how to bring that together. So don't worry, I will be reaching back out to you. And thank you again for sharing the insights. Your story of solo funds is so freaking inspiring. And I know that the audience is really going to resonate with it. So thank you again.
Thank you. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. So I appreciate that.
Well, folks, that's a wrap for this episode of FinTech Confidential's Leaders One-on-One series. If you've made it this far, go ahead and subscribe, share, like, follow, all that fun stuff. And until then, keep moving forward. As we wrap up today's episode, I've got one last thing for you. If you're in the trenches fighting fraud and financial crime, you know it's a complex battlefield. That's where Hawk's AI tools for real-time payment screening, AML, transaction monitoring, and dynamic customer risk rating come into play. These aren't just buzzwords. They're game changers designed to make your compliance more effective and less of a headache. Imagine slashing through false positives with precision and giving your compliance strategy the edge it needs. Head on over to gethawkai.com to sign up for a demo and discover how their platform can revolutionize how you fight fraud and financial crime.
This has been a production of DD3 Media with all rights reserved. This is provided for informational purposes only. It is not offered or intended to be used as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. We strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, but will not be responsible for any missing facts or inaccurate information. You comply and understand that you should use any of this information at your own risk. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile financial assets, so research and make your own financial decisions.